The hotel was situated directly across from Thrupp College, where I was then engaged as the Cornish professor of English literature and rhetoric. Thrupp was, and is, even now as I set down my story, a men's school of, shall we say, modest reputation. Its buildings are a motley collection, some of them truly hideous, erected at the beginning of the last century by men who envisioned a seminary but later contented themselves with a small enclave of intellectual inquiry and classical education. There was one impressive Georgian building that housed the administration, but it was surrounded by altogether too many dark brick structures with small windows and oddly placed turrets that were emblematic of perhaps the most dismal period of American architecture, which is to say early Victorian Gothic. Some of these edifices surrounded the quadrangle. The rest spilled along the streets of a town that was all but dominated by the college. Because the school had elected to retain the flavor of a small New England village, however, the colonial clapboard houses that lined Wheelock Street had been left intact and served as residences for the more eminent figures in the various faculties. At the outskirts of town, before the granite hills began, lay the farms, struggling enterprises that had been witness to generations of men trying to eke out a living from the rocky soil that always put me in mind of thin, elderly women. We ousted, and therefore fortunate diners, stood at the center of this universe, too stunned yet to begin to shiver in earnest from the cold and the snow that soaked our boots. Many people were squinting at the blaze, or had thrown their arms over their eyes and were staggering backward from the heat. Somewhat bewildered myself, I moved aimlessly through the throng, not having the wits to walk across the quadrangle to Wareham Hall, where I might have attained my bed. And so it was that my eyes were caught, in the midst of this chaos, by the sight of a woman who was standing near a lamp-post. I have always been a man who, when glancing at a woman, looks first at the face, and then at the waist, those shallow curves that so signal youth and vitality, and then thirdly at the hair, assessing in an instant its gloss and length. I know that there are men for whom the reverse is true, and men whose eyes fix inevitably upon the bodice of a dress and then hope for a glimpse of a calf. But on that night, I was incapable of parsing the woman in question in such a calculated manner, simply because I was too riveted by the whole. I will not say plain, for who of us is entirely plain in youth, but neither will I say beautiful, for there was about her face and person a strength of color and of feature that rendered her neither delicate nor pliant, attributes I had previously thought necessary for any consideration of true feminine beauty. She had immoderate height as well, which is often off-putting in a woman, but there was about her a quality of stillness that was undeniably arresting, and if I close my eyes now, here in this racketing compartment, I can travel back in time more than 3 decades and see her unmoving form amidst the nearly hysterical crowd. And even as I moved closer to the place where she stood under the lantern, the golden brown of her eyes, a color in perfect complement to the topaz of her dress, an inspired choice of fabric. As it happened, this was a skill at which Etna had no peer, that of matching her clothing and jewels to her own idiosyncratic charms. She had almond-shaped eyes and an abundance of dark brown lashes. Her nostrils and her cheekbones were prominent, as if there were a foreign element to her blood, and her acorn-colored hair, I guessed, would unwind to her waist. She was holding a child in her arms, which I took to be her own. My desire for this unknown woman was so immediate and keen and inappropriate that it quite startled me. And I have often wondered if that punishing desire, that sense of fire within the body, that craven need to touch the skin, was not simply the result of the heightened circumstances of the fire itself. Would I have been so ravished had I seen Etna Bliss across the dining-room, or turned and noted her standing behind me on a street corner? I answer myself, as I inevitably do, with the knowledge that it would not have mattered in what place or on what date I first saw the woman. My reaction would have been just as swift and as terrifying. In a further aside, I should just like to add here that I have observed in my 64 years that passion both erodes and enhances character in equal measure, and not slowly, but instantly, and in such a manner that what is left is not in balance, but is thrown desperately out of kilter in both directions. The erosion, the result of the willingness to do whatever is necessary to obtain the object of one's desire, even if it means engaging in lies or deception or debasing what was once treasured. The enhancement a result of the knowledge that one is capable of loving greatly, an understanding that leaves one, paradoxically, with a feeling of gratitude and pride in spite of all the carnage. But of course, I knew none of this at the time. When I had attended with some impatience and distraction to a man who had attached himself to my arm, an elderly gentleman with rheumy eyes looking for his wife, and I turned back to the place where the woman and child had stood, I saw that they were gone. With a sense of panic I can only describe as wholly uncharacteristic and quite possibly deranged. Fortunately, such agitation was hardly noticeable in that crowd. I searched the quadrangle as a father will for a lost child. Many people were already dispersing to their homes and to cabs, a fact that did little to ease my anxiety, while others had emerged from the surrounding houses with blankets and coats and water and cocoa and even spirits for the victims of the blaze. Some of those who had been in the...
To keep listening to this audiobook, I've left you a link in the description so you can do it, at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.